Greetings. Today I'm going to talk about hosting, what happened last year and the year before, and what's happened this year. I'm actually surprised because I looked back through the videos I've done over the last year and a half and I didn't talk about the hosting. Last year was miserable. But I'm going to start with a story. So my story goes back to 2006 and I wanted to put up a website for my business, because I mentioned that I was an independent consultant back then. And I wanted to have a website where I could put all the stuff up that I did, stuff that I could sell. And I also added a blog to it. So I can't remember the name of the initial company, but what ended up happening is that they were out of Canada and a friend of mine had me go to that site with her. So I didn't know they were in Canada. And their site crashed. Everything crashed. I know what that feels like now, so I feel bad for them. But in essence, I was kind of just out there. And we got some kind of recommendation that we sign up with 1&1. So signed up for 1&1. And back then it was only $15 a year. That worked out well. I remember that I paid for like 3 years because I just wanted to get that out of the way. And that wasn't bad for a while. Then it started going up a little bit at a time, went up to $20 and then $28 and then 30-something dollars until last year. Last year, I ended up getting a bill for $437 and I was in shock and I didn't know why. Earlier in the year, I ended up only having one website, and that was one of my blogs. No, that was my business site. My business site was the only site that I had that was still working online because Ionos, I-O-N-O-S, only gives you one free SSL certificate. Any other certificate that you want, you have to be willing to pay $50 for each one. So that would have been another extra $150 out of my pocket. And I didn't have that at the time. I may have it now, but I didn't have it back then. So I basically said, okay, let me just keep my business site up because I thought that was most important. What ended up happening is that I couldn't get into my own sites to do anything. So it was just down for like, 3 or 4 months until I heard from Ionos beginning, I'll say the end of July, telling me that my account was going to be, overcome and that I had to pay another annual payment. And it was going to be $437. Now, the truth of the matter is, it started at over $600. I said, that's incredible. That can't be fair at all. I have trouble believing that. But that's what it was. And then they said that I actually got some discounts because they moved me into, I'll say, let me call that. And let's just say I've been a member because when they bought out 1&1, then it kept me in there as a full member. So I got a discount. So the discount brought me down to $240. I wasn't necessarily happy about that. Actually, I wasn't close to being happy about that. But at least I figured, okay, I can take care of that. This is what it's going to be. I had to pay different parts of it. So I had to pay a certain amount just to have the hosting. Then I had to pay the other amount for the SSL certificates. But I got there. And I'm thinking, okay, at least I've gotten through this part. Maybe everything's going to be good. Then I got an alert. And I got an alert from my bank. And it was early the next morning telling me that I was way over. And I said, wait. How am I way over? I'm not way over. I paid for everything yesterday. They sent me the receipt, email. I knew how much I'd been paid, had paid them, whatever. I knew I had the money in there. Now I was going to get paid the day after, so I wasn't overly worried about that. But now that I'm, in default, over $100 in the hole, I freaked out. So I called the bank. I said, how am I under this? I paid them last week. So the lady looks it up and she says, it looks like they have hit you twice for the same thing. So now they had taken 2 payments out of my bank account. I said, oh, no, we can't have that. I said, what can you do? They said, we can put them on hold. So that will at least give you some time to talk to them. I said, thank you. So then I had to call Ionos again. And I said, what did you guys just do? You've hit me up with this big thing. I got the lady who I had talked to the day before, and I said, look, you and I were talking about this. You told me how much it was going to be. I paid that. You said everything was fine. And then today I get these emails after I called the bank saying that you had taken some money back and then you had charged me a whole lot more. I'm in overdraft. I could be fined, not fined, but, way over. And she says, oh, well, let me see what I can do. I'm thinking, what, you want to see what you can do? You're the one who did this. It took me almost 3 hours because they kept putting me to different people. And then this guy finally came through and he says, okay, we're going to overturn what we had taken this money out since we already saw that you had done it, since you have a copy of the receipt and we now have a copy of the receipt because they kept sending me all these different people. And it finally came through. Everything was through. I had my websites back, had my blogs back. I wasn't happy, but I said to myself last year, that's it. I'm done with them. And because they had kind of backed up on the time, I knew that I didn't have to worry about it until probably the end of July, but I wanted to do something earlier. So probably in early May, I reached out to my peeps on Slack. Yeah, I got peeps on Slack. And I said, okay, who are you people using? I need to know where I can go because I just don't trust Ionos anymore. And it turned out that 3 of the people who are in my Slack group said, oh, we're on People's Host. It turned out to be one word, by the way, just so you know, People's Host. And I said, how come I've never heard of this? And one of my friends says, I've actually told you about that, but there's always things going on. You probably didn't remember it. No, I didn't remember that. So I get a little bit of information. I do a little research online, and then I need to get myself going so I can call them because I've got this loyalty thing that I've had to try to break over all these years because I stayed loyal to one-on-one. I stayed loyal to Ionos since they were part of one-on-one. I've got domain names through GoDaddy that I've had since 2003. I'm just that way. I'm really loyal to stuff. I met a friend of mine. I saw a friend of mine like 3 weeks ago out at a Denny's. I don't know, but he had come in from out of state. And he told the story of when I stood in front of him when a guy looked like he was going to pull a gun and I stepped in front of him, so I was going to take the bullet. That's the kind of loyal I am. That's one of my biggest things. So anyway, so I get this information and then I call the guy at People's Host. Guy's name was Adam. Now I guess they have a bunch of, not maybe a bunch, but they have like a group of people. And I was told that I needed to ask for him, so I did, and we started talking. And, it's a different kind of thing. Their prices are way lower. As a matter of fact, today I paid $108. That's going to give me 2.5 years of hosting. Look at that. $108 because I'm paying for 2 years. If I'd only paid for one, it would have been $92. But by paying 2 is only $108. What? Got to do that. And then I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at all of my blogs because I know which one I'm going to keep. I'm going to get rid of the others, but I want to see if there's certain things on those other blogs that I want to keep. So that took me a long time to do because on not my business blog, but on my main blog, I had over 3,000 articles going all the way back to 2006. So that's or 2005 actually. So that's a whole bunch of articles. Now I knew the real early stuff. I wasn't bringing any of that stuff over because, back then, some of the blog articles might have been a long, but only one paragraph. But they were a long paragraph. And some of them were, 2,500 2,500 words. Some were as much as 3,500. That wasn't the most I ever did. On one of my blogs, I actually wrote 5,400 words and added a whole bunch of pictures. So anyway, I decided, okay, I'm going to start with my local blog. And my local blog is probably the one where I didn't use it as much as everyone else because I just bought it. I had it like, 6 or 7 years, but it was local. So I used to talk about a lot of local stuff, and then I was traveling on, out of the area again. So I didn't have as many things to look at, but I decided at a certain point, I'm going to keep 27 of those articles. And now I had to say, okay, what am I going to do with those? So what I did, and this turned out to be kind of brilliant if you ask me, and yes, I'm going to say it was brilliant. I figured out that what I could do is I'll keep them on the website that I'm going to keep or the blog I'm going to keep, and I'll act like I'm going to post a new article, but I'm going to copy it out of the other blog, copy it in there, and then I would, click so I could see what it looks like, and I could see what it looks like and say, okay, great, that's there. I only kept 27 articles on that one. I said, oh, you know what? That's not bad. That's good for me. So then I went to my business blog. Now, my business blog, I had about 1,700 articles, and, there were enough on there that I wanted to keep, and I kept about 130, I think. And the main thing is that I'm going to do a second look at those, but I don't have to worry about it right now. Because when I was first talking to Adam, his first question was, how come you need 15 gigabytes of storage on your blog? I said, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. And then it hit me that at a certain point, there was a thing that's called Smush that you could use on your blog so that if you had a big image, and I had some big images because back in the day, that wasn't a thing anyone ever talked about. But by having something that was smaller, then it was easier for people to get through everything you wanted them to look at. So I went in there and I deleted every image that I had in there that went back as far as 2017. Then I called the guy back and I said, okay, I did this. What do you see now? He says, wow, you're only down to a gig and a half. You're actually doing good. You don't have to really do anything else. I said, okay, thank you for that. But I do have to do some other stuff. So I went back to my business. And like I said, I got around 127, 129 articles, has certain images in there. And I moved those, basically the same thing I did with my local blog, is that I went in there, acted like I was creating a new article, pasted everything, looked at it to see what it, looked like online. And, they're off a little bit, but that's okay. I can handle that. At least I remember that part of coding. And so I put that on there. I said, okay, is there anything else you need with that? He says, no, everything's going to be fine. Now you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to do anything else. I said, okay. So now let's talk about GoDaddy, because my business website is with GoDaddy, and they give me a free website, and I'm using that one for my local blog. And one of my domain names is actually with Ionos, and that's pretty much it. I still have my business blog, but I actually did that through Google because way back in the day, that's all that was. We didn't have anything else. So he said, okay, you know what? It's going to be easy. You just want the 2 websites? I said, yes, I just want the 2 websites. That's, really the whole thing that I'm looking at. And he said, well, just so you know, if you have an account with us, then you don't have to pay anything new for your name, for the blog. So I said, wait, what? Yes. So your business site is called ttmitchellconsulting.com. You don't pay for that. We cover that. I said, wow. And I'm just sharing. He said, that's free too. I said, wow. Because I was just in that kind of mood. So this is a good deal. It's a great deal. And because I'm going through these different circumstances, I actually have to give him my password so he could go look at GoDaddy to make sure that what I thought I told him that I had there he would see the same thing, and he did. And then he had to get into Ionos because I told him, look, when we talked about Ionos a couple of weeks ago, I gave you a password, but I had a bunch of different passwords because I didn't put it proper into my files. So I had 6 or 7 different ones. He says, okay, I'll try it. And so he actually got through. So when he did that, then he had to create a new password so that he could get in. I told him I tried to get in, couldn't get in. He says, okay, I'm going to get in for you. I'll let you know what happens. So he goes in, he gets in. He says, wow, I didn't realize that they were actually charging for different, for all those SSLs. I said, yeah, they did. So I paid for it today. I'm good to go. It won't go live until Wednesday when I'll be at work or on the in the car driving around delivering pharmaceuticals to people. But it's way more calm than it was last year, and the year before was a mess. And it takes care of one of the links that I had on GoDaddy, and I got that. Like I said, I got the main one in 2003 when I was doing everything else. Like I said, they were it. And the thing is that GoDaddy wasn't owned by anybody else, so that didn't cost much. So this year, I'm not upset. I'm calm. I'm chill. I could say that I would recommend People's Host, but truthfully, I want to see what I'm going to look at first. At least I know that it costs way less. This guy's been good to talk with. And there you go. But I'm hoping that some of y'all understand some of the things I was saying, because these are the things you're going to look at. If you're going to have a business site, see if you can shop around to find you, or you're going to help you find who's going to have the lowest cost. People's Host, like I said, my peeps told me about it, so I'm good. You can look that up. Look it up. They tell you all the different stuff that you offer. I'm a happy guy. So you can have that, because they will do your domain names. They don't charge you anything extra for that. At least they didn't for me, since I got down under a certain number of gigs for storage that I needed. But you know what? It's still not going to be all that much. It's not going to cost. I think the highest he got, and he says I didn't need to use all that stuff, might have been around $150 a year. Take that $150 compared to that $437, I'm sold. But that's it. I'm happy. I'm calm. That's all I got. And yes, I'm wearing the blue shirt because all my shirts turn out that they're either orange because of Syracuse University, or they're red because that's my favorite color, or they're black because, those are the others. I need more shirts. I need more colors. I'm going to be working on that. Anyway, my name's Mitch Mitchell. Let me know your thoughts. Have any questions? I will try to do what I can do. And I wish you all the best.